Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social podcast. Today I'm joined by Twan.
Hello.
And Iselm is here as well.
Hello.
And today we'll be taking a look ahead at the X2O Badkamers Trofee in Antwerpen, better known as the Scheldecross. If you remember back to last year, this is the place where the Belgian Championships were held and Laurens Sweeck won. But this year the parcours is completely redesigned. Twan, tell us.
So they have changed the finishing and starting street. They have moved it quite a bit to the right, which unfortunately has taken out the majority of the sand section. And we will now have the hill that we used to see, I think, somewhere near the beginning of the lap. We'll have a passage of that in like the kind of the middle of the lap and then at the end as well. And as you remember, it will probably be quite a fast course.
Normally this would then be a sand cross, but as you said, most of the sand is out. There's still some sand in, but in less significant places. Some more grass, and with the forecast of rain, do you think that this rain will really drain this grass so we can get a mud fest here?
I think on the old parcours, you really had this section after the sand where if it rained, it became quite slippery, muddy, and it was quite tough. I think we saw a crash last year there of Toon Aerts as well. So I think there's possibilities for that, yes.
Then, of course, the story of the week here is the return of Mathieu van der Poel to the field. The world champion is making his debut of this season. What do we expect from him?
He's coming back Friday from a training camp in Spain. He has been he had been training in Dubai, or at least having kind of a vacation training combination, I guess. But it's the fact that Van Aert came and immediately got a podium makes it for Van der Poel harder to have less expectations for him. So I think he will be up there with the front runners.
Yeah, I'm expecting him to be in the battle for victory. I don't expect him to immediately start dominating here, but I think he should definitely be making the first group, and it will be an interesting race.
In his media appearances, he's said some quite contradicting things. So he said, if I won't be competing at the front, it would be a bummer for me. But he's also said, I don't really know where I stand, so I don't really expect that I will be competing for the win immediately. So you guys expect that he will win, or at least be contending for the win here in Antwerpen. But what do you make out of these statements he's made?
It's no weird that he's insecure about his chances of winning, or at least competing at the front, because we think at least that the level has been going up the last year, and there is a progress that is going on with the likes of Iserby, for example. And for him it's also very hard to see if there is any changes in the cyclocross field, and if he is going to be able to match that level. So I think he's with a lot of doubts, and he doesn't want to come over insecure because he's the world champion, of course. But he really doesn't know where he's standing, maybe, and is just willing to show that jersey and try to fight for the win.
Yeah, I think it's very natural here to just kind of be downplaying the expectations. Just make sure that you can come into the cyclocross season and that people don't expect you to be there from the first second, which is fair enough, to be honest. We saw Wout van Aert also do it, and I think after what we had seen from Van Aert, people are expecting similar things or better from Van der Poel, so that might be a bit tough on him.
Well, at least I'm expecting Van der Poel to be in the front as well, just like you guys said. And I don't know if he can win here, but it will definitely show if the level of cyclocross really has improved there. Because if Van der Poel will have a tougher time, it can mean that he's focused more on the road and has lost a bit of his punch of the cyclocross. But looking at his performance in the Tour of Flanders, which he won, I don't really think that he's lost this acceleration out of the corners. But you never know. But it will definitely tell us something about the level of the cyclocross if Van Aert or someone, well, Van Aert isn't participating this weekend, but people who Van Aert has been around here will also be around Van der Poel. It tells us, okay, the level of the cyclocross has gone up. Van der Poel has some work to do.
I think for the cyclocross in general, for the sport in general, it's going to be good if he's not going to be as dominant as he was only 2 years ago. Because I think last year he kind of was dominant in a way, but we already saw that there were some hiccups here and there in his races. In my opinion, I think the World Championships were his most dominant race of whole season, I guess. So it also shows that he has one goal only, and the goal is to become world champion yet again. And I think that we have to realize that and take that in consideration in his performances.
Well, Van der Poel is one guy who's making his return here. As I just said, Van Aert isn't here. Another rider that isn't here is Felipe Orts. He will be riding a C2 race in Spain. But there's some more guys making their return here to the field. And those are also riding for Alpecin Fenix on the road. Tim Merlier and Gianni Vermeersch. I mean, the expectations for them are lower than they are for Van der Poel. But what do we expect of these two guys?
I think these are usually two guys that you would put somewhere around that 5th to 7th, 8th place. Of course, there are days where they perform better. There are days they perform worse. I think to start off, that they should be happy if they can get a top 10. And I think that is what they will be aiming for upon the return.
Yeah, I think for both guys, they are usually top 10 runners in a way. They are also pretty consistent in the results if we talk about a top 10. So, it will be interesting to see what they will offer. And of course, this year with the likes of Ryan Kamp, for example, those youngsters are also up there in the top 10. So it will be interesting to see how they, how that challenge will help them or, become a disadvantage for them to be in the top 10.
Personally, I would put Merlier somewhere, at least based on last year, for like the remainder of this season, somewhere between the mid top 10, somewhere between places 4 and 8, sometimes on the podium, sometimes a bit lower, but that's at least the place I expect him to eventually end up, not per se this weekend, because of course, coming back, you need to get into a rhythm. We know the drill, we've talked about it earlier, and Vermeersch would put a bit in the lower end of the top 10, somewhere around places 7 to 12, and on a good day somewhere towards 3rd or 4th place. But that's personally what I think, and I think this weekend they will be a bit lower compared to normal, especially if it's a mud cross. If it's a mud cross, I think the same goes for Van der Poel, that they all will struggle, because coming back in a mud cross is, I think, at least way harder than coming back into a relatively fast cross.
Yeah, it's definitely true. I mean, for Van der Poel, at least, we have seen that his worst race, or at least the race he didn't win, was in Ronse. When he came back, actually, from a trainings camp on the Friday and had the race on Saturday. And he lost that from, on a relative tough parcours. And I lost it from Tonar. So I think, for all these guys that are coming back from the road, I guess they really want to have a relative fast parcours, not so much, a muddy parcours. I think a little bit of mud wouldn't hamper their race, but it doesn't need to be a very slow parcours, because otherwise they will struggle a fair bit.
Yeah, especially if there's a lot of running. That was more my point. If some of these grass sections are completely underwater and it's completely running, that's the point that I think they will be struggling, because that's totally different than putting down the power. But there's also, of course, the riders that we've seen here week in, week out. Iserby, Sweeck, Aerts. Normally on a parkour like this, or at least on the normal Scheldecross, I would put Sweeck forward. He won the Belgian Championships here last year, but with the new parkour. Who do you guys think that are the main guys, and where would you put them against, like, Van der Poel?
I think on the old layout, I would definitely be going for Van Toerenhout and Aerts here to really be up there. But with the new one, I'm not quite sure if it's still the same, which look like quite long, powerful straights. But I think those two guys will definitely be up there again. Of course, joined by Iserby as well, and hopefully a few more.
Yeah, I think if the descent is going to be crucial, Sweeck is of course a name to shout. But in general, I think that no matter what race it will be, that we will see those 4 guys in the front with Van Toerenhout, Iserby and Toon Aerts, of course, and Laurens Sweeck. Van Aert is obviously not here because he's still on the training camp, so otherwise we would have seen already the battle between Van der Poel and Van Aert, which is the same. But I think that it will just be the 4 strongest guys, and it's really hard to say because their performances, to be honest, in the last few races have been a little bit irregular. One day it's one guy and the other day it's another, so it will be, I think, a very tense race.
I think it's already hard to tell between those, but what makes it harder is the uncertainty about the new parcours, and 2, the weather. What influence will it have? Because I think if it's a muddy race, we will see other type of riders than when it's a bit of a mix. If the sand is wet and soaked, but the grass is still relatively intact, then Sweeck won't have the advantage of the sand because the sand will be easy to ride. But if it's completely dry, you will see different riders coming to the front. So I think it's very hard to tell here who we will see at the front, especially depending on the parcours. But I think after the women's race, which we'll talk about later, we will have a more clear view of which riders we can expect in the men's race, because the weather, like I said, the new parcours, it just creates a level of uncertainty which makes it extra hard for us to predict who we think are going to be able here to challenge for the win. However, we're still going to try and make some predictions here. And I'm not going to go first for the simple reason that I don't know. And by letting one of you guys go first, there's less people to pick for me.
Brilliant. Then I'll go first and have some faith in Mathieu van der Poel and predict that he will win his first race back in cyclocross.
I have to say that my first pick in my mind was actually Van der Poel, but then I would probably go for Toon Aerts, considering the fact that it's going to rain. I mean, we never know how the tactics will play out, but then I would say Toon Aerts.
Then I will go with Michael van Toerenhout here, because I think he has the upper hand here over Iserby in the sandy sections and is a super strong rider at the moment. And if it rains, I want to put forward Corné van Kessel for a strong performance because he loves a muddy cross.
I didn't know two choices were allowed, but okay.
No, not for a win. I'm just saying rigged. I'm expecting a solid performance by Corné van Kessel if it's muddy. Something like top 3, top 5, something like that.
All right.
Anyway, with that said, it's time for us to take a look ahead at the women's race. The women's race always provides us with an exciting race, but who do we see here? Because the last couple of weeks it's really been Alvarado against Brandt. Has there been time for others to improve their form to be able to challenge here, or are we just going to see Alvarado against Brandt once again?
I think that will be the race we are looking at. I think Betsma might be able to make the first group, but just based off the fact that there's sand, I'm counting out Worst. It just hasn't been going well for her so far in the sand crosses this year, and I expect that to continue.
Yeah, I mean, at this moment we have those two now at the front. I have the feeling that Alvarado really wants to make a two-way battle out of it, really try to get the tension up. But I don't think in a week a lot will change. Maybe there will be some people that had a very hard, intense training week behind them and are now actually going to utilize that shape that they have from that training that they did 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. So we might see a small change, but I wouldn't expect big changes in the front.
Out of those two, once again, as we had at the men's race, I think it's really hard to make a prediction because if it's muddy, I think Brandt has the advantage of being the powerhouse out of the two and really being able to put down that power. We saw it in the climbs in Boom last week. I think Brandt was playing with Alvarado and Boom for a couple of laps. She was staying at this same gap around 8 seconds, and then on the cobbled climb one time she put the power down, sprinted up the hill, closed these 8 seconds all at once. I think she was in control of that race, and I think if it's muddy, Brandt has the upper hand here. But I think even if it's dry, I think still Brandt is really the woman in form at the moment and definitely the one to beat, and Alvarado will have a really tough time, especially if it's muddy.
Yes, I still think that Alvarado last week showed a little bit of improvements here and there. I think she drove a pretty good race. However, it wouldn't surprise me if Brandt still has the upper hand on her, because she looked so strong in the last few races, and that difference is not something that you will bridge with 2 good weeks or something. So we have to wait and see, but I think Brandt has the upper hand at this moment.
Then another question I would like to ask is, do we see Honsinger challenge here for a podium?
I think the gap to the likes of Betsma and Worst is still a little bit too big for that. I certainly see her challenging for 5th place, maybe even 4th, but I certainly Betsma should still be out of reach.
But last week she had a pretty bad start. Do you think that if she maybe has a better start, she could at least... You already said you think Worst doesn't have the parcours here that suits her. Do you think that Honsinger then could be maybe challenging for 4th?
Yeah, I think that is in the realm of possibilities here.
Also, what about Inge van der Heijden? Last weekend showed a bit of improvement, finishing 13th. She loves parcourses like this. If it's dry, do we see her maybe coming towards the back end of the top 10, maybe more to the places where we expect her to be with the talent she has?
If it's going to be dry and fast, yes. If it's going to be a little bit more muddy and rainy day, then it will be a little bit harder, I guess. I think for her it would already be good to get back in the top 10. But especially if it's going to be fast and dry, which can happen, then it would be then she would be a good bet to place for top 10.
Yeah, I think top 10 is something that she should be aiming for, and I think it is definitely possible, especially if it stays dry and it looks like the fast course that it usually was and has been.
Then something else. If we should believe the start list, Evi Richards, the 23-year-old cyclocross rider for Trek, will be making her return to the field, and I think she is. There hasn't been anything announced, but I've seen pictures and videos on her Instagram that she's been training, so she looks to be making her return to the field here. Last year she got a couple of good results, podium in the World Cup in Waterloo, 4th place in Namur, and 6th at the World Championships in Dubendorf. Twan, what do you think that she will be able to do here in the Scheldecross?
I am so excited for her return, and I'm hoping that she can challenge for a top 5 already. The woman is just a raw talent. I think if you looked at the mountain bike World Cup in Novo Mesto, she did extremely well there as well, and I'm super excited to see her return to the field this coming Saturday.
She's also done some mountain biking this summer, and judging by how that went, I think that's more the type of parcours that suit her. As well as I can add that with that is the results that we've seen. She's already won the UCI World Cup in Namur once, the same year as she became under 23 world champion. That was in Valkenburg. Those seem to be the parcourses that suit her more. But on this parcours here, you say you hope she can challenge for a top 5, but do you think it's realistic?
I think with her amount of talent, I think a lot is possible, and it will be an exciting race.
Then it's time to make some predictions. Who do we see winning the Scheldecross here? Brandt, Alvarado, or perhaps someone else?
I think that for this race, it would be a very safe bet for me if I would say Lucinda Brandt. I think she is the woman with the most momentum at this point, very strong. It would be a surprise if she wouldn't win this race.
Twan, what do you think?
Well, I tend to agree with Issam, but I think I'm supposed to make an original pick. So then I'll go with the only person I think is capable of beating her, which would be Alvarado.
Well, then my life is being made very hard here, but I will go with the winner of the World Cup in Kokzijde 2 years ago, Denise Betsema. She always loves a bit of a sandy cross, so I will stick with Denise Betsema here for the win. With that said, I think we've had it all for this episode of the Cyclocross Social podcast, where we took a look ahead at the X2O Badkamers Trofee in Antwerpen at the Sint-Anneke Strand. Twan and Nissan, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for hosting.
Yes, thank you.
Later, and that later is tomorrow or whenever you're listening, at least on Saturday morning, we will be back with another preview podcast. That podcast will be about the Super Prestige in Gavere. Of course, this weekend there will be more podcasts coming towards you, and those will be the analysis of the race we just discussed, the Scheldecross in Antwerpen and the Super Prestige in Gavere. There's also another podcast that you might have missed, and that is the check-in we had with Cameron Mason, where we talked about his season. So if you still want to listen to that one, make sure to check that out on whichever video or audio platform you are listening on. Thank you guys for listening, and I will see you guys next time. Goodbye.